I'll reconvene this April 11th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome to Harris Hall. Thank you for joining us for the afternoon session. Moving along with our agenda, we completed the morning session up to Commissioners' business, and we'll step forward with our afternoon session, in which we have our initial is item number 14A. Now, to follow along with this on your computers at home or here with us in the hall, if you view today's agenda, click on View Material. Gives you all of the information surrounding the agenda item that we're going to be considering. We'll be considering Order 170411-09 in the matter of supporting the development of an interpretive center at the Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery, delegating authority to the county administrator to enter into an agreement with the Friends of the Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery for a long-term lease option, etc. Mr. Rickoff.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, we have Mike Russell, Parks and Animal Services Division Manager, along with Steve Mealy and Ken Engelman from Friends of the Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery.
And your friends of mine.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, thank you. Mike Russell, Lane County Parks and Animal Services Division Manager. I'm joined today by, as Greg mentioned, Steve Mealy and Ken Engelman, board members of the Friends of Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery. We also have in the audience today Larry Six and Tom Hoyt, who are also board members for the Friends. Our item today is a culmination of about 10 years of effort by these folks and others in conceptualizing, planning, and designing a world-class destination point along the beautiful Mackenzie River. The board will hear a presentation from the Friends of Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery on their work related to establishing an interpretive center at the site. They want to move forward with a fundraising plan and want to establish a commitment from Lane County related to a long-term lease option for the property. The board is also being asked to amend the current Parks Capital Improvement Program to designate $10,000 to the project. In the late 90s, well, first of all, the Friends of Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery have been involved with the property since the early 90s. It's been a long-term relationship. They've cared for the property. They've worked with the Parks Division to watch out for the property and prioritize improvements on the property. In the late 1990s, with the assistance of Lane County Economic Development, the Friends secured over $300,000 to refurbish the site and add some interpretive elements to the site and establish the Mackenzie Chamber of Commerce office at the site. The Friends proposed in 2007, they came to the Parks Advisory Committee and proposed the museum on the Mackenzie. It was a small development of a museum, interpretive center highlighting the area's history, native cultures, and local industry. And it was envisioned that the museum would enhance the value of the site as an information center and increase attraction as visitors to the area. The Friends asked the Parks Advisory Committee in 2007 for a recommendation to conduct a feasibility study for the museum, and the committee unanimously supported that effort. Since then, they've been working at over 3 phases of kind of a, like I mentioned, a conceptualization and planning process. Phase 1 was the completion of an interpretive vision and plan. That was done and finished in 2013. Phase 2 was a market study and feasibility assessment for a museum. That was completed in May of 2016. And then the most recent effort was a site plan design that was completed in February of 2017. So with that as a backdrop and the effort taken, the Friends feel comfortable now coming to the board and saying, hey, we've done our homework, we want to proceed, and would like the county to also commit to the project. On March 13th, just recently, the Parks Advisory Committee was given the same presentation that you're going to see today and voted unanimously in support of the project and recommends the adoption of the board order that you're considering today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Ken for their presentation. I'm going to get it going here. I'll be driving and Steve will be giving the presentation, and then we'll entertain your discussion.
Gentlemen, it's an honor to be here. My name is Steve Maley. I'm president of the Mackenzie Guides, and Ken Engelman is to my right. And Ken, you probably know as the publisher and editor of Mackenzie River Reflections, and a long-time mover and shaker in the Mackenzie Valley. Before I begin, I just want to say, obviously retired now and been in government in different levels and different kinds of government most of my professional life. I've never worked with anyone that's more professional and more of a partner than Mike. And I just have to say that. Just a genuine partnership and always a sense of welcoming and how can we do this rather than what are the obstacles. And it's just been a real pleasure, both at a professional and personal level, to work with you.
Thank you, Steve.
Mike.
Thank
you. Mike has provided you with a very nice overview, and we'll fill in a few of the blanks, a few of the details. But I think the beginning point really is the current story really starts about the beginning of the 1990s, and I'd like to defer that to Ken, who was chairman of the Mackenzie Valley Chamber of Commerce, to sort of fill in the blanks, and I'll pick it up about 2007.
Okay, so in the early 90s, Bill Rogers was a county commissioner at that point in time, and the ownership of the property prior had been split between EWEB and Lane County. It became a single ownership at that point in time, and a task force was put together to determine what should occur on the site because we had deteriorating buildings, and the option was either to demolish or refurbish. So the recommendation from that task force came out with the development of an interpretive center on the site, and we applied for and received the $300,000 in Forest Service funding, which allowed us to do a turn lane into the property, have a designated rest stop, and the Chamber of Commerce office that would distribute information to encourage people to either extend their current stay or have a reason to come back to the area. So whatever was done in the 90s is still there. We reestablished a quarter-mile long water line from Hatchery Creek to the property itself. As I said, we have the turn lane and parking lot. The buildings are all now secure. And from what we can determine, this is probably one of the few areas in Lane County or the Northwest where you can find a hatchery similar to what you would find in the 1900s. All the others have new buildings on them. This is as it was then, so it's preserved and it's secure. Now what we'd like to do is create a new opportunity to create more traffic on the site so we can invest some more into the property, do some more with the historic structures as well. And there's quite a few details, and Steve will tell you about those.
Good. Well, in 2007, Steve Schaefers was president of the Guides at the time, and Dave Helfrich was still very active, and of course we all mourn Dave's passing. But in any case, it was clear that you could no longer have a wooden boat built in this part of the country in 2007, and it didn't have to go far beyond that to see that our legacy was slipping away. And so Dave and Steve and I thought, well, marvelous opportunity to sort of memorialize the institutions here and take advantage of that great hatchery and have what we then called a museum. And so we put together a vision statement, and I'm going to read just a little bit of it from 2007. It was presented at that time to the advisory council. Dave and Steve and I did that actually, but just a few bullets from this 2007 vision statement presented to the advisory group. That what we then called was a museum. It will be famous among riverboat enthusiasts for its unequal collection of drift boats showing their evolution. Number two, it would be equally famous, especially among K through 12 educators and students, as an environmental education resource, where we would showcase this marvelous geology and hydrology that gives us this unique, as Gordon Grant says, unique river on the planet. And we'll say more about that. And then, of course, the great story of the fish. Roderick Haig Brown, I happen to be a book collector, and Roderick Haig Brown wrote the finest fishing literature in the world. And he once wrote in 1941, Oregon's Mackenzie is the perfect type of Pacific Northwest trout stream. And he actually provided the setting, the Mackenzie River, for his classic book, Return to the River, The Story of a Spring Chinook, which was published in 1941. So this river is known perhaps in many places better beyond our borders than some of us who live here and take it for granted. And we thought, well, we just simply need to capture this precious jewel and tell its story. So that was basically the thrust of the vision statement. So we wanted to make sure that we not overrun our headlights, that we proceed slowly and carefully, not oversell it, and make sure that we not create any enemies in the way and build partners slowly. So we had, as I said, the vision statement that you see, and the first step really was to develop a proposal, a prospectus, if you will, to say, well, what would we interpret? And Jan Coleman came to us almost serendipitously, a marvelous lady from Portland who's had a career that's been worldwide in planning museums, interpretive facilities, and she's come to us pro bono and actually loves the idea. She lives in Portland. She's been retired, but she's helped us along the way. And in 2012, we had a workshop up at the old hatchery. We had about 40 or 50 people there, and we called them in and said, let's think about what we would interpret in this site. And in the course of that two-day session, we came up with 3 themes that would be interpreted. Jan called them storylines. One would be the story of the boats and the guides. The second would be the story of this marvelous geology that evolved into this one-of-a-kind river that provides, many of you I'm sure know, most of the water in the Willamette River in August at Portland. And that's a fact, and it comes from the unique geology that gives birth to the Mackenzie River. And then finally the fish. So those would be the 3 storylines, and we roll those out in this proposal. You see the cover of the document. The next step in due diligence was then to take advantage of this wonderful University of Oregon, which I'm a graduate, and many years ago, and ask Bob Parker, who heads up the community planning workshop, to help us out with a feasibility study. And that simply addresses and asks the question, if we build it, will they come? And Bob, we raised about $30,000, and Ken and I wrote some grant applications and were successful, and we dug up a few other extra bucks and paid Bob, and he did a great job and basically said, yes, if you build it, they will come. You could probably expect from 30 to 50,000 visitors per year. And that you're probably going to go in the hole about $100,000 a year. which is typical. They looked at all the other similar facilities around the state, including the Oregon Trail facility over at Baker City and all the ones that you know about. And they all operate the Bend High Desert Museum. And by the way, let me just say that we want this to be the analog to the Bend High Desert Museum. That class, that quality, and as that tells the story on the east side, we would tell the story on the rainforest side. In any case, typical, so we would expect that we'd have to raise a few extra bucks, but usually that's done through a sort of a gala event once a year, and people dress up and act silly and raise some money. So we would see ourselves doing that as well. So the second step then was a feasibility study, and then the third of 4 steps was then a site plan. Well, what is this place really going to look like? And we really couldn't go any further until we had a real sense of what this facility would look like, and that is a site plan. So Jan then suggested that we get in touch with her colleagues up in Seattle. So Tom Hoyt, your friend and mine, in last August went to Seattle, and we met with the Portico Group, and there were 3 gentlemen there, and Jan, who's retired, who worked with them, went with us, and they found time from their schedule. At the time, by the way, they were planning the children's exhibit in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. This level of people, unbelievable. And turns out they were all Oregon graduates, and they all loved the McKinsey. And they said, my goodness, we'll drop everything. What a great idea. And so Tom and I on the spot hired them for $70,000. And that, just to get ahead of the story, the whole project up to this point's cost about 100, and we paid about 90 of it through, in fact, we had our guides banquet this last Saturday night and raised $17,000 to pay off the last of what we owe Portico Group. And so we tried to not overrun our headlights financially either. We didn't want to make any obligations we couldn't pay for, and we paid for them. And certainly we would appreciate a contribution that you've already entertained, but we've been self-sufficient, and we're proud of that. So in any case, the Portico Group folks said, yes, we'd certainly like to help you out. And so they plan to come down in October, and said, you folks get some people together at the old site. We'll hang out at the Wayfarer, and we'll have a big get-together in October, and we'll talk about what this thing should look like. So we scrambled around, and about 35 to 40 people came to the Wayfarer, and we spent a day. And we started, of course, and you know the site, of course. This is simply the valley, and there's the 45 acres that you own, that the county owns, and that's the site of the old hatchery. This is Gastina property, and there's Lieberg Lake and all the familiar sites. And then to focus down, this is what's called the historic district. These are the old facilities on about 7.5 acres of this 45-acre piece. And that's, I'm sure you know, in the National Register of Historic Places, and so that has some special rules that apply. And 7.5 acres, the actual interpretive center would be located here, adjacent to the historic district. Now to focus a little bit more, this is some high ground. This is an old flood channel from the McKenzie that has been dewatered over the years. This is Hatchery Creek. There's a water right here that historically provided water through pipes down to the old hatchery. Again, this is a 7.5 acre site. And let me just say, as part of the due diligence, before we went any further last winter, we thought, what would the fatal flaws be? And we figured, well, one fatal flaw could be with the Oregon Department of Transportation in terms of ingress and egress to the site from the highway. And the other one would be a possible fatal flaw would be the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, because they have stakes, of course. And so we, last January, we went up to Salem, Tom and Ken and myself, and we met with the SHPO folks, and we met with the Oregon Department of Transportation and rolled the project out and said, this is where we are. We'd like you to weigh in on the very beginning of the project. And they were delighted and basically said the existing permits that you have for ingress and egress will be sufficient. You don't need any more, regardless of whether you might have to move the entrance 100 feet or a couple of 100 feet one way or the other. And the SHPO folks said, thank you for asking us. We think that, that a site like this would enhance the historic district if you incorporate them into the theme, and of course you'll honor keeping their outward appearance and the integrity of that. So we felt good about that. That's the way it looks today. It has a new sign, but that's the old residence that's still occupied. I mentioned before, this celebrates the rainforest. So as the High Desert Museum represents the desert, this magnificent site, this is a steamy August morning, but we would celebrate the Pacific rainforest type that we have, and what a wonderful setting to do that. That's the site of the old pond. There's a walkway around that, and just a few random shots on the site. And the buildings, and they still look pretty good after Ken and the federal agencies came up with some bucks to scrub them up, and Mike's done a good job of keeping them maintained and got the moss off the roof, and these are solid buildings. I'll tell you, the infrastructure was built well for the old hatchery, so they're not in danger of falling apart. They do need to be scrubbed up a bit. This is just a walk around. These are some of the folks that participated in the workshop last October. Now in some detail. This is a site analysis. This is the riparian area for Hatchery Creek that provided the water at the old hatchery. This is high ground. This is a bench, about a 40-foot bluff here. Not really a bluff, but a rise to a bench that was actually, there's old fruit trees here, which probably homestead at one point. And flat ground, you can see the elevation on the topo maps that show it's fairly flat. We would leave all of that undisturbed, by the way, as well as the higher ground, and concentrate the development on the lower ground below the slope. So this is actually the site, as you drive in, this is the actual parking site that exists right now. And then there's an old orchard and some other sites here, and the actual overflow channel and the historic district here. We thought we should have obviously some criteria for design, some criteria for the structures, and some criteria for the site. So I won't read every word, but you can see that the site criteria, what do we want the site to look like when we're through? We'd want it to maintain its characteristic natural setting, minimizing environmental impacts, maintain site carrying capacity, reinforce the views to the river, and maintain, of course, the existing Douglas fir, and that's going to grow up and get old, and preserve the wetlands. As far as the building criteria, we'd want to, of course, retain, preserve, and restore the existing historic sites, work them into developing the interpretive theme, but maintain the integrity of them in the process. Restore the old hatchery, and carefully design the scale and massing of the interpretive center, that complements the existing site. Number 10, retains the site setting with a light touch. And then number 11, we're excited about, we want to make a subtle reference to the lines of the Mackenzie drift boat in the building form. Shorthand of saying we want the pavilion to look like a great big drift boat. You'll see that I think they've captured it pretty well. So those are the criteria. Now, as we look, we'll be merciful today and only show you 34 slides, but there actually were a lot more in the longer version.
We have time.
You'd throw us out, Commissioner. In any case, I said that by way of saying we did ask them to develop 4 options for us. I'm only showing you one today, and that's the preferred. So we wanted to look at several options for the site, and the one I'm going to show you here is the recommended one. So this is called the recommended plan, the drift boat option. And what that means is that the pavilion looks like a drift boat, and of course, so that's the theme that goes through. So a museum on the meander. By meander, we mean we're going to re-water the old channel, and you see live water here. Now you can begin to see the outline of a drift boat here for this some 40,000 square foot pavilion.
And that pond is existing, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
The pond labeled there, that's existing. That's currently.
Yes, yeah, that's the existing pond. That would be re-watered with water from there's water right from Hatchery Creek. In the previous slide, you saw the existing hardened drive-around parking area. The new pavilion would be built on top of that. The parking area would be to the east of that in the old orchard site. And you also note that the new structure does not infringe on the old historic district. We retain the integrity of that, but as you'll see in a minute how they're complementary. This is drills down on it a bit more. You can see in a little bit more relief how we re-water this, and we see now the boat actually is floating on, gives the appearance of that on live water. And here the historic district is preserved, but it's also carrying out interpretive functions that go on in the pavilion. Now, this next slide, I want you to be prepared for, because it's kind of the theme of the whole presentation. So we're going to go on a ride. Big oars on the entryway. That lady in the orange shirt that's Jan Coleman right there. That's her. This is the Great Hall. Now we're already through it and looking outside. Retain the big trees. And you can see how that's built on the current hardened site, and the parking areas in the old orchard area. We actually moved the entry down about 200 feet. The county, that is the Department of Transportation, said that's okay. So anyway, I like to just sit and watch that thing take us on a fly around. But anyway, the magic of technology is wonderful. Now we'll look at a little bit more detail. You can see the lines of the boat, and this is the innards of the pavilion, which I said was probably somewhere around 40,000 square feet. Put the roof on it. These school buses are more than a suggestion of what we hope it becomes. And now we're going to go inside. When we look at the entry point here, this is what we call the Great Hall. This is the reception area. And then we go to the right, and this is the first theme, which is the hydrology and geology. So this is where we tell this. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to go to the McKenzie River Trust program on Friday, but Gordon Grant, Forest Service Hydrology, and just a marvelous person, gave the most wonderful description of the relationship between the McKenzie and the geology of the High Cascades that I've ever heard. I've known Gordon. I retired from the Forest Service, and I've known Gordon for years, but he just outdid himself with the spellbinding story of the interaction of the High Cascade geology and the fact that McKenzie has no running tributaries. They all come from Great Springs. All that wonderful snow pillow on the High Cascades at Belknap Crater and the others all percolates down into 7 great aquifers, and that water is collected probably in an amount of water twice the size of the Great Salt Lake up there, and the water is probably an average of 7 to 8 years old and forever 36 degrees, and so it comes out in an incredibly pure form. And that's why this river is so very special, as Gordon says, one off on the planet. There's no other river like it. But that's why it's a driftable river, because the river is constant flow when other rivers are dry, or virtually so, and why it's such a marvelous habitat for fish. So all of these stories would be combined in this place. We'd first tell the story of the relationship of geology to hydrology here. This is called a Tamilich. We would have a theater here, further exhibits here, an actual lab where young people could do experiments and look at the relationship of the evolution of the geology and the hydrology and the relationships. Here we'd move into the guides and the boats theme. Visualize this as a big circle that would have 9 pieces of the pie, where we would start with the plank boat of the Thompsons and end up 9 boats later with our current drift boat, each displayed with the equipment of the period, and then move out to where we would show actually, because we've got water underneath, we can actually have a walk-through place where you can see actual fish spawning in their actual virtual real habitats. So we finish up with this theme and then pass on out, and people can have experiences on the site with the pond and so on. So I should also say that we would have a virtual trip through Martin Rapids, and then people have the opportunity to go jump in a boat and go through Martin Rapids, or experience a virtual experience with the High Cascades, and then tie in with a trip to the High Cascades. So for the day, so we would combine virtual experience with real experience. Just to show that there is another option. I don't happen to like this one because it doesn't look like a drift boat, but we did want to see a little bit different. This is option 2, where we talk about a meander-inspired building form. It just gives us a little bit different spin on how it might look. You can see the design is somewhat different, but its relationship to the historic district is still the same. Configured a bit differently with a little bit different use of space, but still essentially the same, except it has a grass roof. Okay, enough of the fun stuff. This is how just to get to the bottom line, we asked them to give us some thoughts about how we might phase into this thing. Phase 1 would be about $16.3 million, with 40% of the building and exhibits in place. Phase 2 would be 25.5 with 2/3. Phase 3 would be full building and exhibits, and then this would have all the bells and whistles. So some folks kind of suck in their breath when we get further to the right, looking at $43 million. That's a pretty, but you get a zip line with that. So, well, yeah, I just want to stress these are estimates. We did want to be realistic about thinking that we couldn't do it all at once. You're obviously going to have to phase into something like this. I don't know how close these numbers are to being the real numbers, but the fourth step in the due diligence is the business plan. And I want to say that Ken and I worked up a business plan and submitted it to Travel Oregon. We asked for $50,000 to do the business plan. We'd asked Bob Parker to do it, and Ken, I think that was the #1 recommended project.
There was a workshop on the McKenzie with about 40 people attending, and we rated different potential projects, and this was rated #1 for the area.
So we expect to get that, and we expect a business plan. As you know what a business plan is, that simply says, okay, all the happy talk aside now, what's your product and who's going to buy it? And how are you going to manage the place to make sure it makes sense? So that's where we really drill down and ask the tough questions. So that's the last piece, and we're going to do that. And before that, after that's done, if it's still a thumbs up, then we move to real fundraising. But anyway, that's the way we'd phase in, and I think we've got one more slide left. No, this is how we would phase in. So obviously we'd have the parking lot. This is a part of the pavilion that would actually have the boats and the guides. Those are in place, and I can't tell you how many folks come to us that have boats and say, for God's sake, get that thing built so we've got a place to put them, because there's a lot of vintage boats around. So anyway, we do that first. And probably the river and the hydrology and the geology second. And then the fish third, and then configure most of the site as we move on. Make sure this is undeveloped meadows here, but with hiking trails and interpretive trails throughout the site. And I think this one was intended to show. Well, I think there's one more phase, isn't there, Mike? Nope, that was the one with the zip line. But anyway, the ask, yeah, there it goes. Here, up in the high ground, we complete the zip line down to the bottom. So anyway, the ask is that we would ask, it says the McKenzie River Guides Association, but really the Friends of the Old Hatchery, I should have said that. They're really one and the same, but the Friends is a 501c3 organization that's been around a long time, and so that's the vehicle we use, and didn't get the slide work properly, but we're simply asking for an option on a 99-year lease to try to pull this magic off.
Thank you, Steve. So, Chair, Commissioners, the next step is that consideration of entering into an option agreement for that 99-year lease, as well as determining whether or not to amend the current Parks Capital Improvement Program, SDC funded program for contributing $10,000 to the project.
Well, before I call for other commissioners, my heart is beating loud. My gosh, it's exciting. You mentioned the High Desert Museum. Since our kids were young, we went to the High Desert Museum, and you described it perfectly. You are, let's see, what did you call it? You call it the analog to the High Desert Museum, was your exact quote. And I can envision it, I can taste it. I mean, that just is amazing. When you think about it, there is nothing like it in the world. I have a mid-70s era Alumawell drift boat that you could borrow. I'm not going to give it up. So at this point, I'll call on commissioners. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Bozievich.
So it looks like a wonderful plan and well thought out. But I wish you great luck dealing with SHPO. I dealt with them a lot when I was doing the revised shop at the Leeward Powerhouse, where we actually had to save the doors and put them up on the side and stuff. It was fun having to try and get everything to match up and deal with them to build a new structure in a historic district. So all that said, I have to ask some background questions to make sure I have full appreciation for the decision we're making. So bear with me, guys, because I'm going to be quizzing Mike a little bit here. So 10,000 in Parks SDCs. I tried to find the current 17 to 21 capital improvement plan, and all I could find was the draft plan online. But as I look at that plan, it varies, year to year from a low of 385,000 to a high of over $1 million annual projections, and spending 3.2 million over the 5-year period. So there obviously has to be some kind of reserve in the SDC fund, and of course a projected annual income. So probably my first question is, what is the projected ending fund balance at the end of this fiscal year that's beginning this proposed 18 to 22 program? If you can kind of tell me that, and what the expected annual SDC average over those 5 years of income will be. I just kind of want to frame how big 10,000 is in comparison to, is that a big ask? Is that a little ask? So
currently we've been building up the SDC fund. We haven't allocated very much out of that fund. We're trying to build it back up for phase 2 of Armitage Park Campground. As you know, in 2009, we used most of that SDC balance for that project. We've been building that back up. Right now, at the end of this fiscal year, anticipated about 94,000 in reserves for the SDC program.
And this 10,000 is going to be this fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. And annually, what's about the average we take in park SDC?
30 to 40,000.
Okay. So the capital improvement plan is not solely straight out of SDC money.
That's right. We use a combination of operational resources, property sales, and timber sales. And then, of course, grant, that's what we're using for match for grants that we apply for.
Like we did for, some other parks. We've had some major grants that have helped out, whether it's Archie Knowles or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, I just kind of want to, for the public that might be bored enough to watch this meeting, put in perspective for them that, because you hear somebody come and ask for $10,000 in county funding, what is that relative to? And particularly when we're talking about parks monies, where I know we've got approximately a $17 million deferred maintenance issue for our existing parks. So, a new ask of 10,000 kind of, we want to make sure people understand it's from this fund that's supplied by, SDCs are charged for new building permits out in the unincorporated areas, and that's where this money's coming from. So it's intended for expansion of park capacity because it's new people moving in that are paying it. So it's not really there for deferred maintenance on existing parks. This kind of qualifies as expansion of park capacity in our community. So it fits the description of why you'd want to spend the money. And the funding source is the correct source. 99-year lease. We've talked about 99-year leases on this board before, in other places. And we actually went through an RFP process to request proposals on getting a 99-year lease for a piece of property. This seems to be kind of like a sole source, almost a sole source contract in a way, in that we did not go through an RFP process. Of course, I don't know anyone else that would want to lease this piece of property that one was going to deal with the SHPO issues, and two, the use they're looking to put it to is actually almost a public use. So I don't see an issue with that, but could you real quick, and I do see legal counsel sitting in the background, maybe just give me a little bit of comfort that we did not go through a public process before we're going to authorize you guys to possibly sign a property transaction like this, like we did with the Six and Oak property.
I haven't had. I've been watching this from a distance.
Use a mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been watching this from a distance, and I think you're probably correct about, for the factors that you've cited, to give a more definitive answer. I'd like a little bit more time, but is the board being asked to make a decision today?
We're asked to delegate authority to enter into agreement, and I guess it's for an option. We're not actually signing the lease yet, but we went through an RFP process before we delegated authority to enter into an option with the 6 and Oak. So I'm just kind of looking for a little bit of clarity to make sure that we're not.
And I'd make this suggestion, you could certainly just make that contingent upon county council's approval, or we could do that check after the meeting today.
Yeah, I think we've got enough to justify it. It's have we crossed all the T's and dotted the I's like a sole source contract where we have findings to support that sole source? Just have we done enough to make sure that we're
And that's why I'd recommend putting that additional option with it, and then that'll give us a chance to work through and make sure those findings show up in the final document.
Great. I appreciate that. And I once again want to get back to the Friends here now that I've gotten done with all that important administrative stuff. What a spectacular job. I mean, that's a great concept of doing the drift boat form building. It is a unique story to tell. You know, I always told people when I was working at eWeb on the water side, I was an engineer in the water division. So, you know, I spent a lot of time going up and down this river, how unique the McKenzie River was as a water source for a municipal utility. It actually made our job difficult because the water is so pure coming out of there that in order to meet federal regulations to prevent people from being infected with cryptosporidium, which we can all remember there were some problems out in the Midwest where people died, you know, from some wells being contaminated. We have to show a 3-log removal of particulates. Well, McKenzie is so clear and has so little turbidity, it's difficult to show the 3-log removal of turbidity. You know, it makes eWeb's job really difficult that we actually have a source water that is cleaner than some people's tap water. It's an incredible river, absolutely incredible. And you know, that huge rock sponge that sits up on the Cascades, nowhere else in the world. You know, and it's what gives us that incredibly pure river and that summertime flow. One of the things that Eugene has that very few communities on the West Coast has is enough water rights with seniority to go past 100 to 200 years worth of water supply for the growth of the city, and knowing that flow is actually supportable too out of the McKenzie. It's just an incredible water source. So I'm looking forward to being able to tour the museum and show people just how incredible this river really is.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a good catch by Commissioner Bozovich with staff, so I appreciate that. Very interesting. I love the design. And it's, you know, when you go on I-5, you see a customer service center shaped like a ship, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. So I think that's a neat, that it's very attractive when you can put a design like this in place. So I really appreciate that. The other thing, so Greg Rickhoff in his prior life introduced me to a gentleman that they had just hired out of Kansas, and Richard, yeah. And what was interesting, my first conversation with him was when he was talking to me about he and his wife's love for fly fishing. And this person from Kansas was so well aware of the McKenzie River. That's what was amazing. And so this is why I think this has a really golden opportunity to really be successful, because of how many people, not just here in our area, but around the United States and really worldwide, are aware of the McKenzie River and, of course, our famous fly fishing. So I think anytime you can have an interpretive center like this, shaped like a drift boat, I mean, I got to tell you, I just think what a great selling point. I really commend you. And I just, watching that was pretty amazing. I really appreciate it. Nice, great job. And we'll work with staff and through legal on the language on what we need to as far as the county's concerned. But I commend you. Very, very, very nice job. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks very much. Many years ago, I was a young lawyer, and I was working on a case involving a big lawsuit, and the senior lawyer on the case that I was working with was from Dallas, Texas. And he said, you know, I hope I get out to Oregon to visit you at some point. I mostly fly fished all over Colorado, but you know, I really want to fish the Mackenzie River. And so I did end up going fishing with him on the Mackenzie. It was a great experience. But another thing that I think is important about this project is I'd like to just put in my 2 cents worth for the design, because I think the design of the building in the form of a Mackenzie River boat is a tie-in between the recreation on the river, whether it's fishing or boating, rafting, ties it in with the cultural context of the river and how it's being used by people. The other thing which I didn't see, and I hesitate to say you might want to think about, because I think you've thought about everything, but one thing I want to think about a little more is the relationship between the Eugene water, domestic water. I saw you had quite a bit of other aspects of the water, but I think that the commissioners are well aware of the significance of the river to the people in Eugene. And this is back to more of our research about Travel Lane and our investment in Travel Lane County, is that we're finding that the local population is a big source of our tourism money. Yeah. And so to connect the museum or the facility or the exhibit in a meaningful way to the daily lives of a couple 100,000 people downriver, I think is an opportunity. I know that there'll be plenty of ideas of how to configure that space, but I would just like to put in a word for that, because the water quality for drinking water purposes is so good, and it has, you know, inured to the benefit of the people of Eugene for, you know, over 100 years now, as a result of the public ownership of Eugene Water and Electric Board. I just think that's a tie-in that it's got to be. I do have another question about the ingress and egress to this site. We've had this come up in other situations where we are trying to, on behalf of a property owner or an economic development activity, talk with and communicate with and cajole and encourage ODOT to make changes. And I'm just want you maybe to elaborate a little bit more about the line of sight for purposes particularly of that eastbound left turn that could be problematic, and how you're doing that, and whether you got enough sight line to make that work.
Yes, we do. When it was originally designed, the turn lane heading upriver, I think, is about 150 feet long, if I'm correct. And now we're extending it anywhere from 100 to 150 feet further to the east. So
you're improving
the original
it.
Estimates were for about 50,000 peak numbers in there, and they said the design could actually handle 100,000. Mm-hmm. And that was the idea of going to ODOT initially. Before we came up with a firm plan, we had the 4 options on the table and said, these are the things that we're considering, and we want input from you to help us create the design, which they did.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of the money, I want you to be talking with Mike and others at the county about other funds that the county has. Mm-hmm. Clearly, there's a travel lane connection here. There's a parks connection. There's a road fund connection for things that are legitimately within the road fund. We know from our history here that we can't give money for parking lots because we've had litigation that stopped us from doing that involving the Eugene Airport. But certainly expenditures of money within a road right-of-way are within our authority. I hesitate to offer any money there because our public works director is in the back of the room, and he's probably trying to balance his budget right now with his computer open. So I don't know where that would go, but I just don't want to take anything off the table in terms of what we could do beyond the funding mechanism you've described, because sometimes if you're able to come in, we are able to come in, we can help leverage that last bit that you need. And I'll just broadly say that economic development, road fund, parks fund, and travel lane are all, potential assists to this project. And just as currently 1/4 and probably 1/5 of this board, I would just say I don't really have any authority to commit that money individually, but I think that if the magnitude of the project will justify some more searching on our part. And then last but not least, Commissioner Bozievich pointed out that in making the financial commitment, I think it's something I feel like we should do right away. I think it's a good thing. In terms of the real property transfer, I think we need to make sure we have taken the time that we need to take on that. So.
Right. And that's why we're asking for an option.
Yeah, okay.
Commissioner, if I might, your excellent point about the relationship of McKinsey to the water supply in Eugene. When I mentioned the Tamalitch lab inside the facility, one of the reasons that some of the experiments that kids could do there is to look at the actual water quality of existing water and compare that to drinking water standards. And that was one of the experiments that we wanted to have there. So there are different ways to make that point, but I think you make an excellent point. And Commissioner Lyken, I wanted to comment to you as well. A year ago, this time I was in Argentina on the northern end of Patagonia fly fishing, and the person that we were with had a shed that he had built just to protect the marvelous McKenzie riverboat he'd built using the design of Roger Fletcher's book. And we didn't get the fish out of that boat because it was so proud of it. We ended up in a fiberglass boat. So people all over the world revere this boat and this country that produced it.
Well, thank you. You know, we're short on time, so just of the many things that I'm going to say, I will say I'm drinking McKenzie River water out of this cup right now. So thank you. And you know, it tells you how great the renown of our river is, the McKenzie River, when the second longest river in North America is also called the McKenzie. And few people say, well, which McKenzie, when they're talking about our McKenzie. So it's and Tom, I think you probably fished at McKenzie in your time, haven't you? So you know, I'll not say anything that's not already been said. I'm enthused, fully enthused, and just looking forward to moving forward with the project. I think, Ken, I think I probably first met you when I was on the CVALCO board back in the 90s, and you were probably thinking about this at that point in time. You know,
I've been working on it since the 80s.
Yeah, you've had this vision for a long, long time. Well, share the vision, because it's very hard to not becoming enthused about it. And I said earlier, my heart beats loud. It indeed beats loud. I'm excited about the prospect. I've got a lot of spring chinook out of that river. They're on Greenwood Drive. There's a lot of good just up from the ODFW hatchery, the larger hatchery downstream. But I'm excited. I'm enthused, and look forward to hearing more of it, and just how we can move forward with the project in ways that we can become more than just an observer, but a partner in making this happen. So, Mike, from us, you would like to have just not an order, but a recommendation. We have.
You have the order, Mr. Chair.
We have the order before us. Okay, thank you.
So on that, I'm going to look at Steve. So should we add the recommendation, or what Commissioner Bozievich added? Very good. Okay.
Chair Farr.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, very good.
Yes, if we can do a slight modification so that after the word enter, move to adopt order that authorizes the county administrator to enter after approval of the county council into an agreement with the Friends of Old McKenzie Fish Hatchery.
Then we have before us order 170411-09, ripe for amendment on the fly. So do I have a motion?
So I'll move approval of the order with the amendment as read by Mr. Rickoff in the second, the paragraph noted number 2 in the therefore portion of the order. The county administrator has delegated the authority to enter, upon approval, county council into a long-term agreement with Friends of the Old Mackenzie Hatchery.
Okay, second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich, seconded by Commissioner Like. And any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add one more thing to today's discussion, and that is that the 4 commissioners that are here today will be, in my view, making this decision, and very appropriately so. But we are, in need of another commissioner, and particularly one from this district, where this points out again what we see time and time again, that there's another district issue. And tomorrow we're going to be interviewing, and this is the list of resumes. We're going to be interviewing the candidates for appointment, and it's, I just think that Commissioner Stewart and his predecessors, because Ken goes back this far, have been working on this for many years. And so I just wanted to highlight that we're doing this because we know the people of this district want this done.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Sorensen. This is in the East Lane district, and we do not currently have an East Lane commissioner. And we do have a fairly strict protocol. If something's happening in somebody's district, they get to weigh in on it at least. So we're acting kind of outside of the protocol, but I think we're all ready to move forward with this. Any further discussion? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you for the past, the present, and the future.
Thank you so much.
Allow just a moment for clearing the room and slowing my heartbeat down.
Chair Farr, Mr. Hoyt was reminding me that he was indeed the individual who took Richard and Jan Lariviere down the Mackenzie
Right on.
to fly fish for the first
Nice.
time. So, and that was a great memory for them.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We'll move on then to item 15, and we have a human resource discussion, and we just kind of segued into that at the end of the last conversation regarding the East Lane commission position. And today we have with us Ms. Marcia Edwards from our HR director, Mr. Rickoff.
Yes, at this point, Chair Farr, commissioners, we're looking at developing the deliberative, thoughtful, and respectful process that you talked about last week, roughly at this time. Just a reminder of that meeting. 3 of you were available. Unfortunately, Commissioner Bozievich was facilitating a meeting in Springfield and missed the conversation at that time. To the work at hand, we had 29 applications come through. Of those, 27 qualified. Since that time, one individual has noted that they would be unavailable on Wednesday, leaving us with 26 candidates. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, the Director of Human Resources, Marcia Edwards.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. There's been quite a bit of activity going on around this recruitment as we've been doing the intake of applications and trying to get that data to you and other interested parties. So what I was hoping we could talk about today is how you would like the process to flow tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m., bright and early. So all of the candidates who qualified have been notified that they are to be available tomorrow and show up at 8:45. And when they show up, they will be asked to choose a number and that is the order in which they will interview. Now, the morning session is proposed to be a 5-minute interview, just one question, which, the board can consider what they would like to ask. After that, there will be time for the board to deliberate. Again, we have 26 candidates. It's proposed at 5 minutes apiece, but, the board may want to consider a different time frame. After all of them have done their answer to that one very specific question, then the board can talk about those folks that they would like to move forward for the afternoon session.
Then a couple of things, if I may, Ms. Edwards. You say a very specific question. It's one specific question with probably a pretty broad range of potential responses to the question. What we have before us is a recommendation for the order of the agenda tomorrow, including a 5-minute, assumes a 5-minute interview, 1 minute in between each, for each of the 26 candidates. Now, reviewing the discussion that we had a week ago surrounding this, what you brought forward is pretty much what we discussed at this board a week ago, which was interviewing each, or not interviewing, but allowing each of the candidates. We didn't know it was 26 at the time.
No.
But we thought it might be in the 20s. A period of time, 5 minutes is the number that's here, to present themselves to the Board of County Commissioners, every single one of them who has applied, who is eligible and is available tomorrow. And I had a chance to review the meeting itself from last week, and those are the directions you were given last week. So with that in mind, does everybody have a copy of this? It is tentative, and it's the morning interviews, assumes 5 minutes interviews, 1 minute between each, with a total of 26 beginning at 9:05 a.m. And then it includes a couple of breaks in the morning session, and this is what we have before us. And then presumes a break for lunch sometime in the noon time frame, and then enter into longer questioning interviews in the afternoon.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody has a copy of this. So anything else you need to add? Then we'll go to Commissioner Sorensen.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, just very quickly. And
thank you. One moment.
we did, this is a piece of work we put together based on your initial thoughts. We've had some chance to think this through a little bit. We're very aware that the 26 candidates, we will not sequester them. They will have access to cell phones and their technology. There will clearly be advocates and supporters available to be in this room. The entire interview process will be carried live on television. With that said, given the random number selection, we would put the individual who goes first at a distinct disadvantage from those who follow later in the process, knowing that they would then indeed know the question. So it is staff's recommendation that in deciding a question today that we announce that and share that with all candidates so they have a full sense of what will be asked of them in the morning. It's also our recommendation that during the initial interview process that that it not be an interview with follow-up questions or commissioner comment as you explore issues or talk about what you would like to see in a candidate. The candidates later in the process, of course, would get a sense of how to best adjust their comments. So what we're asking of you would literally to accept this as you would testimony without response. With that in mind, I think 5 minutes might be as much time as you'd want to give, and you might want to consider a 3 or 4 minute window for each candidate. So,
Ms. Miller, and then Ms. Edwards, and then Commissioner Sorensen.
Oh, I just wanted to add that also you'll see in this item, the suggestion was that each of the board members select 2 to 4 candidates that they would like to see move forward to the afternoon. So that's a number that you'll want to consider also, again, thinking about the number of candidates that we have.
Okay. So we're prescribing a 4 or 5 minute period where each candidate presents themselves answering a single or responding to a single question.
Yes.
Then we'll take time around the lunch break, prior to and around the lunch break, to narrow that down to a number of participants in an afternoon interview session.
Yes.
And at which point you're suggesting, HR is suggesting that each commissioner picks 2 to 4 candidates for interview in the afternoon. And no matter how many votes each candidate gets among the commissioners, whether they get 1 or 4 votes, they will have an interview in the afternoon. Is that the prescribed? Okay. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. This is more on the logistics, but some days we're allowed to meet because of the television arrangement between Eugene and Lane County. Would we be able to meet at the conclusion of the morning presentations at noon, or would we have to break because of the television arrangements with the city?
And I'm not sure.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, we have the cameras all day. We have worked out with the City of Eugene. We have this room for the duration of the day. The Eugene City Council will be holding its meeting in the BCC, and they will be live streamed, but we will be televised for the duration of the day, so we will be able to go uninterrupted by the time needed for the Eugene City Council to have its noon work session.
Okay, so is theirs going to be taped, or is ours going to be taped if we met over the lunch hour?
They both will be live. Theirs will be live streamed and taped for television. Ours will be on television.
Okay, so how long would it take if we gave everybody 5 minutes without a question just to tell us about themselves and what they wanted to tell us, as opposed to giving the advantage to the people later on who come up with a better and better and better answer to the question, as opposed to just saying, you have 5 minutes, tell us whatever you want to tell us, and we listen, and we are not then influencing the discussion. We're hearing from them, and no one person, the 26th person, doesn't get an advantage over, the first person. Because the first person who's asked a question, they don't have 25 other answers to compare it to. But if we ask people just to make their presentation, then there's no particular advantage to being first as opposed to last.
That would be true.
Okay. And secondly, I have not done the arithmetic on this because it wasn't clear whether it was going to be 27 or 26 people. But if we did the 5 minutes and we had a reasonable period of time in between them, a minute or two, what does the arithmetic come out to of when we would finish?
Approximately 11:45.
Okay.
So you're looking at about 160 minutes of work.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would just like to suggest that by giving them a question, a broad question, like tell us about yourself and what you want to do as a Lane County Commissioner. That question itself advantages the people early in the process. And if we let everybody tell their views of whatever their views are, we then, between the 4 of us, can gauge the topics they picked as part of the process. So anyway, just an idea. Otherwise, I think we might be talking about, well, what's the most important question? Because it might be, 4 to the 4th power of ideas over what that question should be. I think that it's extremely difficult to come up with a question for a person to assume this job. Now, with regard to the afternoon, we could then work through the noon hour to come up with some ideas of who the additional people would be. Do you have an idea of how many people that we should pick?
Well, in the board item,
2 to 4?
2 to 4 for
Per person.
each commissioner.
That's 8 people.
Right.
2 to 4. Oh, wait, that's
Right. So it could be between 8 and 16.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Okay.
So that's why I thought, the board may want to consider, knowing the numbers we have, knowing the time constraints, a different number. Maybe not 2 to 4, maybe 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or whatever you think makes sense.
if you had two, each commissioner would have to listen very carefully to those 26 people and then say, okay, I got two choices here, 1, 2, A, B. Those are the people I'd like to see get the second round. I don't know, is that too narrow?
If it were two, that may be pushing it a little bit. One thing that it sounded as though you'd suggested we could pick as few as 2 or as many as 4 per commissioner.
Yes.
And so with a kind of a minimum of 2, but with a maximum of 4. So, and then any overlap, of course, that narrows the number down from 16 to whatever the overlap may entail. So, Commissioner Sorensen, the most it would be 16. The least it would be 2, but that's not very likely. That's if all of us only pick 2 and they happen to be the same 2.
Yeah. I think maybe 3 is a more my comfort level, because that's a maximum of 12, right? And a minimum of what?
3.
3.
If we all pick the same 3.
If we all pick the same person. So
3 to 12. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would make it more likely that the people that are rising to the top would in fact be interviewed. If there was a possibility, it's a 1 out of 12 possibility.
And with that, we end up with the eventuality of at least 2/3 of the people who have applied will not have a second opportunity to speak to us. So it'll be a maximum of 1/3 of the people. Okay, that's narrowing it down pretty significantly. Further discussion. Commissioner Sorensen, are you?
Well, could you lead us through the rest of the day, assuming this 12 number, and I guess you don't have to lead us through assuming a smaller number, because we could just interview the people and decide. Mm-hmm. But if it was a larger number, maybe like 8, like 2 people per, how would we do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we can certainly adjust the suggested time period, based on how many that you wind up with in the afternoon. Right now, they're listed at only 15 minutes, but that's assuming the maximum number of 16. So we can adjust those times to give each of the candidates a little more time to speak with the board. Again, we'll want to use very prescribed questions to give them all the same opportunity. But we'll go through all those interviews in the afternoon, and at the end of that time, the board can deliberate and make a decision, or if need be, they could certainly choose to recess and come back the following day to continue interviews and or discussion.
So to put that in time, if I may, if we, let's say we have 8 that we're interviewing, and with the prescribed 15 minutes and a 5-minute break in between, we'd be finished around 3:30 in the afternoon. If we added 5 minutes to make it a 20-minute interview, then it'd be 40 minutes subsequent to that, if we had 8. Okay.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, so at that point, your decision would be based on the packets you've received, the initial morning interview, and the additional questions you've been able to ask in that afternoon. So that will give you, those 3 pieces of data to make your determination. At this point, I would encourage you to stick to probably a 15-minute interview with consistent questions, knowing that you're building upon knowledge already gained from both the packets and the morning interviews.
Thank you. And then we do have the next phase to talk about, which is going to be a little bit open-ended. So let's go ahead with questions on this initial, the morning and the afternoon as prescribed. Commissioner Bozevich, then Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you. So I just want to question the original assumption of interviewing all 26 people. We've had the packets since Thursday night. I've been through all 27 packets because I didn't know one wasn't going to be able to make it, and have a good idea of who my top 5 to 7 people are pretty easily, and could probably even from that pick a top 5 or something like that. Just a thought, and this is just would it be worth and I don't know if everyone else has done that kind of homework, but would it be worth just everybody listing a top 5 candidates? We would have, that's a maximum of 20, could be a lot less where we match up with each other, and have longer interviews in the morning of whatever that shorter list is. And then, we can do a cut down to, the 2 or 3 candidates per commissioner in the afternoon, so we can try and, it seems like every hiring I've ever done, I've never invited every applicant to the interview process. This is a little bit different than a hiring, so I'll appreciate other people's opinion on that, but it seems like to be deeper with the candidates that we would choose, an initial screening might be helpful. So I want to throw that out there as a suggestion. If I'm the only one that thinks that way, I'll go along with the will of the board. But that was my initial thought, was after listening to Commissioner Sorensen talk about the previous process, they all picked the top 5, whoever, and those were the ones that were invited to interview, not everybody. So they made an initial cut from 22 down to 16, I think. After they picked their top 5, there was enough matches and all that stuff that it wasn't even the full 20.
We offered 5 picks to each of the 4 commissioners for a total of maximum 20, but as Commissioner Bozievich just mentioned, the overlap was that it was 16. It wasn't 20, but the initial overlap was 16, which did cut it. The difference this time is we said we would give everybody a shot. So maybe the compromise, I'm just talking off the top of my head here, but maybe the compromise is to reduce the number of minutes of the whole group and then be able to bring back and have a better idea. Because I really, although I have, if I were forced to right now, I could give you my top 4. But I'm still a little concerned about how they're going to present, and that's a big part of the job. So,
thank you. I'm going to call on Commissioner Lycan, and then I'll step through the discussion that we had last week that brought us to the conclusion to interview to allow each person. I'll step through the discussion that we had at length up here last week. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think because we've already sent out. I'm pretty uncomfortable then just making a decision that we're going to change the rules right now in midstream. But I would suggest we take it from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. And here's the reason why. I just was involved in a campaign. I was asking this Republican Party to elect me. And in a sense, I'm asking for them to put me in a position. And I had to know that job. And I'm going to tell you right now, if we get folks coming in here and they can't explain to us why they want to be appointed as an East Lane Commissioner in 3 minutes, that's not my problem. You know what I had? I had a 1-minute elevator speech, I had a 3-minute, and I had a 5-minute. And I'm going to tell you, you do the 1 minute, you got to be extremely succinct and disciplined. And so I have an expectation that anybody who's applying for this position knows what they're applying for. They better know what they're applying for. They better have a good idea of what we do. They better have a good idea what the budget is. They better have an idea of what our shared services are, that we're a subdivision of the state, that we're the public health authority, we're the housing authority. They better know this. And so in my view, I think succinctly somebody can actually come before the board and say why in 3 minutes. If it's going beyond that, I'm going to tell you right now, then they probably do not really know the job as well as they should. The other thing I'm going to suggest is, and the reason why I say that is because we're getting a lot of emails from folks in the Eugene LGAC. If the folks in the Eugene LGAC are listening, we're not hiring the Government and Legislative Affairs Manager. I just want you to all to know that. This is an appointment to the Lane County Board of Commissioners. This is a governing position. And so if you're listening, thank you for the emails, but we're not hiring the lobbyist. And so I appreciate that. So if they could explain to me, the person that they're supporting, why they believe they would be good in governing and being an elected official, that would be great. I think that would make a lot more sense. But that's my view. I just came off that. And either I knew the Secretary of State's position or I didn't. And if I had to explain it beyond 3 minutes, I was ham hawing. So I expect folks that they should have this down in 3 minutes and they can be succinct. And I think that that'll speed this up. And then we can actually go into and get our, because I'm the same way. I think a lot of us here have already narrowed down probably I have a tier 1, a tier 2, and then the others. I mean, that's kind of what I put together. And so, and I'm sure we've all done that. But we've already told the press, we've told the public, this is going to be the process. I think we need to stick to it, but I think we can do it in 3 minutes. That's my view of it. Thank you.
So I'll summarize what you kind of heard from us, and then we can comment on that before we get into what happens if we have a tie. What Commissioner Sorensen has suggested is 3, that we have a maximum of 3 people per commissioner after the 3-minute interview, which is what Commissioner Lycan has suggested. So we have a 3-minute, not an interview, but a presentation period for the each candidate in the morning.
Board wants 5.
And we can discuss that. That's wide open, 3, 4, 5. But with a 3-minute presentation period, a deliberation period, and then interview the list of candidates drawn from each commissioner, recommending 3. That's where we're sitting right now. So discussion to that particular concept, anything surrounding that? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I appreciate the fact that I was not here when I heard you guys say that you were going to interview all of them, and if that's what was publicized and was the board discussion, then we do probably need to stick to that. Then I agree with Commissioner Lycan that 3 minutes is enough time to get through them, and what that will enable us to do is to finish up the initial round of interviews closer to 11 o'clock, and before lunch probably be able to get to where we can each submit our 3 names for the afternoon. What I would also propose is that we restart the afternoon meeting at 1, not wait. We don't need an hour and a half for lunch. Begin at 1. And then we can, depending on how many people we have, we can make that interview, if we do 15-minute interviews and it's 12 people, we'll end with enough time to have pretty lengthy deliberations around trying to get down to one person to a point, or trying to get 3 of us at least there. But for me, I don't need an hour and a half for lunch. Normally, I think we do that partly because it's just the way we've always done it. Half the time I'm ready to come back in the meeting by 1 o'clock. And unless somebody has a lunchtime commitment on tomorrow, I think, we can probably shorten lunch to try and add time to the afternoon interviews, because that's going to be the important part. We get that first cut down and get to talking with the top candidates. That's where I think there needs to be more time for back and forth. And that's going to get another issue about who comes last and all that, and being able to listen and communicate by cell phone and all that stuff. But that's going to have to be a tough decision, because I think at that point we need to interact with the candidates, and there's going to have to be some back and forth. I understand in the morning giving them 3 minutes to do their elevator speech and not commenting on them, it makes it fair from the first to the last person. But the afternoon is going to be tough, so I guess that randomness will just hopefully help weigh some of that out.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. So to restate then, 3 minutes per candidate in the morning, reconvene at 1 o'clock. Right now we're still sitting on 3 candidates per commissioner in recommendation. So Commissioner Sorensen.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this idea. So as I'm recapping it, it's at 8:45, you're going to kind of select them by lot, just randomly. And then at 9:05, we're going to start in with 3 minutes each. And then when we're done, we're going to take a break and then select our people, whether it's, 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it looks like the board's comfortable with. And then we're going to break for lunch for about an hour. And then we're going to come back and interview the people with whatever time. We're going to have to divide it by whatever time we have Is that a fair summary of what you're hearing?
Yes, it's a fair summary, and we'll also, of course, want to leave time for deliberation after the interviews.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And as of right now, the recommended time is 5 minutes per interview in the afternoon with 5-minute break in between. That is what's on the table as a recommended. It's not on the table, but that's, Mr. Rickoff.
I'm sorry, Chair Farr, Commissioners. I was just having a communication with staff to ensure that we had notified the media as we noticed the day that it would be okay to start at 1 o'clock. We noticed the full day and did not have a discrete afternoon starting time. So whether you start at 1:30 or 1 o'clock is completely up to you. You were asking questions about the 15-minute afternoon interviews?
Yes.
And the break in between? And I believe we set that for 5 minutes.
Five minutes is what is outlined.
Yes.
Yes, 5 minutes between interviews with 15 minutes per in the afternoon.
Which I have a table here that if we started at 1:30, the table starts at 1:30. So if we had a complete 12 interviews, we'd be finished at 4:31 or 4:01 if we had 12 interviewees. And if we had 8, then it would be it'd be 2:57. Is if we start at 1 o'clock, it would be 2:57 if we had 8 interviews. Now these numbers, I mean, it sounds like I'm being so precise. There's a little bit of leeway.
And the plan was to actually let the candidates know the times would be approximate. Of course, they will be timed during their speech. And during the interviews in the afternoon, of course, they will be timed, but they need, if you have questions of them, that'll leave us a minute or so to get those answered.
So, Chair Farr, Commissioners, at the risk of being tremendously transparent here, I'm trying to get a grip on what was the purpose of the 5-minute break between interviews. And you'll be doing 1-minute breaks between interviews in the morning. You won't be necessarily using that time to debrief amongst each other. So, I mean, we could mirror the morning 1-minute break between interviews and just to keep the day moving.
The difference being with the interviewees being having questions, there may be a necessity for me personally to make a few notes in between candidates in order to not be making notes the entire time the candidates responding to the questions. So for me, since that is the actual interview phase, having a little bit of downtime, not interaction time, but downtime to write on my paper, make notes as to what it was specifically, the quotation.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, staff is concerned that that's going to be a pretty big gap in time for Metro TV, and perhaps if we were to look at 2 minutes, a 2-minute window, or
Do they not have French online to
I think they
go
do
in
have,
between?
I think they do have music selections that could fit that 5-minute window.
How about the OSU baseball game replay? That would be something I would be in favor of.
I could think of several people in the room who would be very enthusiastic of that.
Well, I just want to say I agree with both Commissioner Farr and Mr. Rickoff that there should be some time for us to write some notes, and I agree that we should just try to keep it moving, but I'm sure we will keep it moving.
So let me restate what I think we're coming down toward. Starting at 9 a.m., staff will escort interview the candidates down one at a time, and they'll come in on a very strict time frame. They'll be allocated 3 minutes per person with 1 minute in between interviews, in between presentations. There'll be 26, I don't have the exact time on that, but that'll be coming out someplace around 11 a.m. that'll finish. And then at that point, the Board of Commissioners will take time to discuss the 26 presentations and the other attributes, the written paperwork and the other elements that are going into our decision-making process. And sometime before noon, we would make a recommendation as to our 3 choices per commissioner. And those 3 choices will go to staff for compilation. This is all done in public session at this point in time. We would break for lunch. Staff would provide lunch for the Board of County Commissioners in the BCC conference room or?
It would probably need to be in the kitchen unless you want to join the Eugene City Council in progress.
Oh, they're in BCC, not in Bascom. Okay, all right. Then in the kitchen, and then we will reconvene at 1 o'clock with a slate of interviews of someplace between 4 candidates and 12 candidates on the schedule that is allocated here, with the exception of, instead of 5-minute break, a 3-minute break in between candidates. That 3 minutes, I ad-libbed that part. 2 minutes is what you'd recommended. So, and then the conclusion of that, which if it is a full 12, it would be someplace around 3:15 or so. Around someplace around 3:30 or so. At that point, the Board of Commissioners would take a short break and then come back and discuss the interviewees. And after discussion, I would entertain a motion for a recommendation to fill in the blank on, if you look at tomorrow's agenda, which I don't have pulled up right now. Tomorrow's agenda states, Order 1704-10-11 in the matter of appointing, fill in the blank, to fill the position 5, etc. So we'd entertain motions. Would presumably there be an initial motion, and we would vote on that. If in order for the motion to pass, it requires 3 yes, 3 aye votes in order to pass. If it's less than 2 aye votes, the motion fails, and we'll move on to entertain a second motion. If that motion fails, okay, I don't have any answer beyond that. We need to discuss what do we do if we get to the point where we've done 2 ballots and the motions have, we don't have a definitive 3.
I think someone does.
Okay.
Robert's Rules of Order does. So I think we discussed it, agenda team, but for the benefit of the board, went back and checked the charter and the code, and it doesn't deal with that. You know, as Commissioner Bozovich pointed out, the statute does deal with a resolution if the board declares impasse on the actual selection of the candidate, and then there is a resolution that involves the governor. But in the intermediate process, that's up to you. So there's no charter provision, there's no code provision, so we go down to Robert's Rules of Order. And in that, basically what it is, as Commissioner Farr stated, a tie motion is a failed motion, and you can just keep making motions until there's one that passes. Or you could, through the other process, make a motion for a different process that, getting at least 3 votes from this board about how you would resolve a tie. So those are your options, the 2 options that are available today. Okay. And I did recommend to the chair and vice chair that I thought it would be very important that process be arrived at today, before the interview process starts. So
what you've described so far, Mr. Dingell, is if we just keep voting without asking further questions, and an experience that I had back in 1992, I was appointed to the Bethel School Board. The first ballot was a tie. They asked another question and conducted a second ballot, which wasn't a tie. So that's an option that we have, is to, if we reach a non-decision after 2 or 3 ballots, then we have the option of bringing the top 2 vote getters or each vote getter back into the room for another question. So.
You could certainly, if you voted and adopted that today, you could do that, in which case I assume that what would happen is we would have another series of the first question for the first time, second, third, whatever, so that there would be a specific question that would be asked of all candidates. And they would know, and they would not see those obviously until that became necessary, I presume, is the.
And so if we presume there are 3 questions for the initial 15-minute interview, this would be a 4th question in a sealed envelope, which we would divulge. Commissioner Sorensen.
I just want to say that if we have our people coming back in the afternoon and there's not at least a consensus during our discussion of the morning interviews and the more intense afternoon interviews, an alternative to having votes would be that we all make one suggestion, one pick each, if there's, kind of an apparent impasse. I won't say a vote, like a vote of 2-2, but I'll just say if there's an apparent discussion that, gee, I'd like to hear more on this person, and we all just picked one person, we could have another, if you want to call it the third lightning round, that might help narrow that vote and highlight that vote. It could be at the end of the whole thing that 4 commissioners say we have a candidate that we all like, or that 3 commissioners say we have a candidate we like, and then that won't be necessary. But I'll just pose that as a way to, and at least in the last time we had the East Lane vacancy, that's exactly what brought about a unanimous vote, was that final okay, everybody should pick one person. And I think that when we had the final round, I can't remember this specifically, but I think it was that 2 candidates were nominated by 4 people. In other words, there weren't 4 candidates, there were 2 candidates, and it came down to 2 people. And then that was a unanimous choice.
I think I've outlined, Commissioner Sorensen, that I think that would be fine. I think that from my perspective, both in terms of procedure, in terms of the legal procedure, that you should decide that today. And I also think that's important for the transparency of the process, that you're all in agreement as to what will occur, in terms of the event, so there's no ad hoc response to it. So you could have, quite frankly, if you all agreed, you could have a series of, we're going to take a vote first. If there's a consensus, we don't have to go any further. If there isn't the selection of a candidate, we could go to the suggestion that Commissioner Farr made. If there's still not enough votes for 3 votes for a candidate, you could go to what Commissioner Sorensen did. I think any of those combinations are fine as long as you vote and agree upon it today. And I really emphasize that you get that decision made today. And that seems to me that through those 3 options, it appears to me you'd get back to where you were. And even if you didn't, you might just do the final 4. The 4 fallback option would be, again, to simply go back to Robert's Rules of Order and just have people make a motion and keep making motions until you receive 3 votes. Okay. That would be the final default, hoping mightily that you never get there.
So then let me reiterate that, if I may. Up to the point where we have interviewed all the candidates and had our deliberation, we have a motion for a recommendation, and it passes 3-1 or 4-0, we're done. We go home. If it does not pass, if no one receives more than 2 votes, then we potentially could have a little bit further deliberation as a board and have a second nomination and a second, or no deliberation as a board, and have a second nomination, a second vote. Once again, if it passes, then we have a new commissioner. If not, then go to another round of questioning, a single question for each vote getter. Could be 2, could be 3, could be 4 vote getters, narrowed down from whatever the number was, and each of those candidates would be asked a single question, after which we would go back to the Robert's Rules of Order with a motion. And I
think the last one was another process was the one suggested by Commissioner Sorensen, which was that if you went through those 3 rounds and didn't do it, that you each suggest, Commissioner Sorensen, was it that you each suggest 1 person? And then the final default, if not reached through that process, would be to go back to Robert's Rules of Order and just start making motions, seconding them, and then.
So we're still at Robert's Rules, and after the 4th question is asked, then we take a vote, and if not, we go to potentially to Commissioner Sorensen's recommendation.
And then the final default would just be to make motions pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay. Now, bearing all that in mind, tomorrow is it's a finite day, and we have ascertained that tomorrow's meeting could be recessed and reconvened at 9 o'clock the following morning, and we're still within the public notice rules.
And Ms. Jones has taken care of that notice as a potential, and that does comport with Robert's Rules of Order. So as long as you have the meeting before your next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay. I still don't feel that we have full finality on this, so let's, the process
I'm
is.
sure Mr. Bickoff has a motion ready to read back to you.
I'm still a little vague on after the third, after the fourth question is asked, we have a single motion or two motions, and both fail. Can you step us through that? This is Commissioner Sorensen's suggestion.
If Commissioner Sorensen's suggestion fails, then I believe that the final default was simply, which it would be the first solution that's under Robert's Rules of Order, which is that we just go back to making a motion and nomination, waiting for someone to second it, discuss it, call the vote until at least 3 votes are achieved.
Okay. Can you describe Commissioner Sorensen's recommendation clearly?
I don't believe I can.
Can you restate it?
My idea was that after our discussion, after the second round of interviews, not the first round, but the first round is we pick people to be interviewed for the second round. But after the second round, if there is a consensus in discussion of evaluating those people that someone should be picked, then I think we should go straight to a vote.
Oh.
If there isn't a consensus and people want to discuss it further, then we each pick one person for another round of interviews, short interviews.
I didn't understand that first part about the consensus.
Nor did I. So the fourth interview question, presumably the 3 in the first round, the fourth interview question is following Commissioner Sorensen's suggestion where we each pick one person. And if 2 of us pick the same person, then
Wouldn't that be just the third? Because I'm envisioning the first round being in the morning, the second round being in the early afternoon or late morning, and then if and only if, after discussion of those 3, 4, 5 candidates, do we then move to some other alternative process?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize for my lack of clarity. When I was using first, second, third, fourth, I was talking after you had completed both rounds of interviews and had actually begun what I assumed would be the first time where you'd be voting for folks. So when I'm using first, so after both rounds of interviews and the top candidates have been identified, and I'll restate what I understood to be here. The first step that would be taken would be the one out of Robert's Rules of Order, which is essentially there'd be a motion made, and if it tied, we would then, and there wasn't no candidate received 3 votes. The next step would be, as Commissioner Farr indicated, we would have an addition. Ms. Edwards would have an additional question. We'd bring those people back and ask them that additional question, allow them a short period of time to answer. The board would then do the same thing. I'm assuming there'd be more than 2 candidates, whatever. You'd vote, make a motion, vote. If that did not work, then I thought what we had done was the suggestion that you had, which was to simply have each commissioner nominate one person, again, wait for a motion, a second, discussion, and a vote. And then the final option would be just if that didn't result in the selection of a candidate, you would just begin making motions, seconding, and voting until a candidate received 3 votes. So really there would only be, as I understand it, after the first 2 rounds of, quote, 2 rounds of interviews, the candidates would actually only be questioned one more time, I think, under the proposal. The rest of that decision-making involves you as a body. That's what I understood, and I'm just trying to restate what I thought I heard in offering a suggestion.
I'm clear with that. The only difference is that after the afternoon interviews, where we ask perhaps 3 questions,
right,
then we entertain a motion. If that motion fails, we can entertain a second motion with a different name. If both of those motions fail, then we go to the next step, which is asking another question.
Correct.
And then we go back to making a motion. If that fails, we make a second motion. If that fails, then we go down the line to the next step.
If I understand, that makes sense. So it hopefully that will continue to be a winnowing process, and hopefully even if you move into multiple steps of that, you'll be getting closer to a decision.
Okay.
We hope.
Commissioner, I was going to make a suggestion that at the beginning of tomorrow's meeting, in that 5 minutes that we've planned, that we have Mr. Dingle explain to the assembled multitude in the Bob Straub room what the rules of the day are going to look like. That'll serve not only to alert the candidates, but also to drill it back into our heads as to how it's going to unfold.
And we did have, that was a provision. I think it was Laura Vinson that was going to be making that presentation to the candidates.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Sorensen, with the board's permission, what I'd like to do is allow Mr. Rickoff, Ms. Edwards, and myself to sit down and see if we can actually reduce that to I think it's easier to see it in writing.
And we can hand it out to all the commissioners and to the
I was going to suggest that we send it to you this afternoon so you have a chance to look at it and make sure you're all on the same page. And then what you could do is we could put that in the form of a formal motion tomorrow so that everyone, before that process started, everyone knew what was going to happen. Again, I really can't emphasize enough. I think that is critical for transparency of the process, that at 9 o'clock in the morning, everyone understands what's going to happen at 4:30 in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon if a particular circumstance exists.
If we were to recess for 10 minutes right now, could you get that in writing so we could consider that this afternoon?
I think we could do that.
So with the board's permission, we could recess for 10 minutes?
I've been trying to enter in on this conversation for a while.
I haven't seen your finger go above the sign, so.
Yeah. So.
For the record, Commissioner Bozievich.
Yeah, thank you. I have one concern with, at least after we get done with the second set of interviews, and we're going to just make motions one at a time of who we want to nominate and hopefully get a second, and whether we get a full vote. That's kind of a process that we're just each, revealing a top pick. One of the things that may help us get to consensus on a single candidate is actually understanding who our first, second, and third picks are, and revealing those to the other board members. We may not all agree on a top pick, but say one of us has a top pick and two of us have that person at number 2, and those two people have different people at number 1. The fourth person has that person at number 3. It may look like it's pretty obvious to the board that person might actually be somebody we can all agree on. Whereas just making motions, this is where I'm hoping to avoid impasse, just making motions where we're all just recommending our number 1.
And I've actually,
if the rest of us don't agree, the motion fails because of a second. If only one of us agrees that seconds it, but the other two don't, it fails because it's a tie vote. And we go through that process, eventually get 4 different motions, so we all see whose top pick is, and it doesn't really reveal anything beyond that. I'm wondering if at the end of the interviews, it might be good if each commissioner could write down in preference order their top 3 candidates, and then we, at the same time share that publicly with each other, and it might help us make a decision in a better process where we understand maybe, okay, Commissioner Lycan doesn't have the same number 1 as me, but my number 2 is his number 1. And maybe I can agree to that. But there's no knowing that unless we reveal it in some way, and making motions only reveals our top pick.
That's called score runoff voting.
Right. I was going to say what you could do.
And as this is not an election, and I don't have to worry about single vote. It's not a public election. I'm not giving more than one man more than one vote.
No,
and you can do that kind of thing. But I think when it comes to trying to get to consensus, that's going to be a much more useful tool than making single motions. And I would hope the rest of the board can see the advantage in doing that.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Bozievich, and you could do that. And I've actually seen that done where you, again, beforehand, let's say that you rank the candidates 1 through 3. You arrive at where, through discussion today, you arrive at a particular score for the person to move on. So you take, if you know what I mean. So, and in this case, it would be the low score, presumably, right? And so you could agree that anybody who gets 4, for example, automatically moves on. Although if you had 4, you'd have consensus. But you know what I mean. You can arrive at a scoring system. I've seen it done that way, and it does in one, with one action, it does significantly reduce the field. And that's, and there's nothing, that doesn't violate any rules. It's just something that you could agree to today, which was that you would assign at the conclusion of the round, if I understand you correctly, at the conclusion of the second round of interviews, each commissioner would then rank 3 candidates, 1 being the top candidate, 3 being the third candidate, and then you would reveal that. Is your suggestion that those would be revealed publicly at that point?
Yep.
Okay. And then what we could do, staff could simply score, though, if you wanted to do what I suggested, which perhaps is you could agree to a scoring system. We would score that, and then you'd move on. Those names would be,
At that
some
point,
names
it
would drop out.
Inform our discussion, our motion,
Right.
making a whole lot better than just random motions from the board.
Or you could do nothing with that, except that now it's been publicly stated and ranked, and you could then move to make a motion, second vote. That's true.
And if we still can't, then we can bring in lightning rounds and stuff. You know.
I prefer Final Jeopardy.
At this point, we have interviewed all, let's say it's 8 candidates. And from those, we're asked to rank our top 3 candidates. I would recommend in descending order, 3 for number 1, 2 for number 2, 1 for number 1, and then 0 if you don't, ranking the top 3. And then the top 3 vote getters would move on to the next round,
Adding there.
which could be a 4th question.
Oh, okay. So you would just say the top 3, totaling their total points by the ranking of all the folks, the top 3 point getters would move on to the next round, to the interview, to the next new interview question. That's okay. That's fine. That would work. You're going to narrow it.
And at the end of that, we entertain motions as per Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, and then remember, there was also the suggestion that before that of Commissioner Sorensen, unless you think Commissioner Sorensen, this process that's been suggested by Commissioner Bozievich kind of addresses your concern.
I think that's a good suggestion. I do.
Okay, and then we could just go to Robert's Rules of Order. Okay.
Anything to add, Mr. Rickoff?
Chair, for our commissioners, we're wondering with this 4th round, how much time we'd set aside for those questions. So as we build out the time schedule, we need to figure that out. I think we're in a great place to recess and for us to formulate something and bring it back to you.
Very good. So can you do it in 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, with the board's authorization, we will recess for, the sound of the gavel will recess for 10 minutes.
Did you need to know how many minutes for each response to those top 3? Was that what the question was? I think you wanted to know, if we're going to ask that final question, the top 3, how long are we going to give them?
How long do you want to give? Do you want to give 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is?
Let's stay with the 3 minutes on that.
Okay.
And 3 minutes to respond to this question, this final question. Okay.
So that was Ms. Jones. So it would be 3 minutes per 3 minutes per applicant with 1 minute in between. So that would turn it into a 12-minute process. Is that right?
Yeah. So for anyone following this on TV, this is actually a very deliberative process. This is since I became a county commissioner, we've appointed a sheriff, we've appointed an assessor. We've been a part of the DA system, and we've also done a state senator, and now we're doing a county commissioner. And really, of all of those, the one that really affects us the most in our daily life is the one that we're entertaining right now. The one that had 27 applicants is the one that we're entertaining right now. So this is important that we take the time to do this openly and in a way that the process makes sense and the public following can understand the process without question, that we're not doing things in a very open and deliberative fashion.
Also the least prescribed process in statute.
Yeah. And maybe we should write a book on this when we're done.
Actually, Doug, I actually think that we're coming up with some pretty good things here through the multiple processes that we've done. And I think it's by design that there's not a specific statute, because I think they want the individual folks to arrive at how they want to do it.
And Mark Frohnmeyer, if you're watching, by any chance, Commissioner.
I was just going to mention, too, that one thing that weighs on me through these appointments is that the people that we're choosing, it's a very anti-democratic process where the people not being served by the appointed official are having no role in the decision making. It seems like an odd thing. And, you know, just for more fuel on the fire, you know, the idea of having a shorter interim appointment so we can have an election, but, you know, still appoint someone, but have a shorter interim. Because this appointment's going to go until what, January of 2019? Yeah. So, you know, one idea, because when a member of Congress dies, a member of the House dies, you know, the state chooses the election, and there's no representative until there's an election. But we don't have that rule right now. So it's just something for us to think about in terms of modifying our charter, that if it's more than a year, you know, then maybe there should be an interim appointment and the board calls an election, so that the people of the district get to pick their own representative.
As you said, that would require a charter amendment.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I was appointed to the Bethel School Board initially on the second ballot. When the Eugene City Council appointed me to replace Bobby Green after he came to this seat right here, first ballot that time. So at the sound of the gavel, I will be recessing until 20 minutes until 4 by that clock right there. I'll reconvene in this April 11th session of the Board of Lane County Commissioners, and County Administrator, Mr. Rickoff, you've returned to the hall. We'd ask you to provide an order, so to speak, an order of the order of the agenda for tomorrow. Can you go through the order, please?
Chair Farr, Commissioners, I will ask County Counsel to go ahead and do that so he can provide scrupulous detail.
Yeah. And this could be adapted to the form of a motion. So here's the one, I think the one change that I want to alert folks to is that it was pointed out when we were doing the ranking towards the end, I think Commissioner Farr, you suggested the number one choice being 3, the number 2 choice being 2. We ran into a concern in the sense of what if a commissioner only wanted to forward one name? In other words, at that point. So what we did was the 3 lowest scores would move on, because that way it wouldn't matter. If Commissioner Sorensen just wants to nominate one person, that person gets 1 vote. He doesn't have to nominate a second and a third. Whereas if you do it, if you give the number 3 choice, number 1.3, there's really, it kind of messes it up is what we figured.
I would hope that everybody will nominate 3, because the whole purpose is to see what your second and third choices are, so we can come to better consensus. But
now,
hopefully folks won't.
Before we step forward with that, if I need a little bit to work on the math on that, because if it's 1, 2, and 3 with the lowest number, then if somebody does not get in the top 3 of one of the commissioners, then they don't get any numbers, a number assigned to them on that one. So they're 0. So if they're 1, 2, and 3, and 0.
Okay. Well, if I guess what I would say is we can use the system you suggested so long as everyone nominates 3 people. That will work. What we were worried about was the situation where a commissioner nominated just 1 person. So if the board agrees that everyone will forward 3 names from the process suggested by Commissioner Bozievich, then we can reverse it and assign 3 to the number 1 candidate, 2 to the number 2 candidate, 1 to the number 1 candidate, and move forward the 3 highest vote getters. But everyone has to nominate 3 people. Does that make sense?
Everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm going to change it. All right. So the morning will begin after the introduction to the process in the Bob Straub room with the interview of all 26 candidates, 3 minutes each with 1 minute break in between. After the interview of all 26 candidates, the board will deliberate, and each commissioner will forward no more than 3 names each, and it can be either 1, 2, or 3 individuals. There will then be a break for lunch. Staff will inform the candidates of who will advance. The question in the morning for that first that all will answer is, why do you want this job and how are you qualified? At 1 p.m., the board returns to convene the second round. Chair Farr will read a script. There will be 15-minute interviews with 3 minutes in between. At the conclusion of that interview process, each commissioner will reveal their top 3 picks, with their top pick receiving credit for 3 points, their second pick receiving credit for 2 points, their third pick receiving 1 point in credit. The top 3 numerical vote getters or point getters will move ahead. And then each candidate will be given 1 final question. They will have 3 minutes to answer with 1 minute in between. At the conclusion of that process, we'll fall to the regular, typical Robert's Rules of Order, where there'll be a motion, second, discussion, vote, and that process will continue until a candidate receives 3 votes.
Or we give up.
Well, I'm the optimist. I'm confident that you'll get this done.
There's a concept called sitting on the gavel. So the only question that I have is, we did not discuss the, prior to your just mentioning it, the question, the single response from the morning. And my recommendation is something a little bit more vague than that, and it's very simple. And it's a question that I always ask when I did the interviewing for the places that I've done the hiring, is tell me why you applied for this job, very simply. And at that point, they have the latitude to tell you why they could include their credentials, they could include their philosophy, they could include just the fact that sounds like a pretty cool job.
If I can, so you're suggesting that the question that is asked of all 26 candidates would be, tell me why you applied for this appointment.
I would agree with that. The other question is leading into people just discussing their qualifications, which we've got.
Is there a consensus on the board that that should be the question?
I agree with Commissioner Bozievich.
Okay. So with that,
With me, thereby,
Yeah.
by default, you agree with me.
I'm very agreeable today.
Excellent.
See me up for tomorrow.
I was going to say, hopefully that carries through to tomorrow afternoon at this time.
Okay.
So with the only modification being that the question that would be asked of all 26 would be, tell me why you applied for this appointment.
And then the interviews in the afternoon will have 3 questions.
Yes.
And do we need to determine those right now in order to have them released today, or will the candidates be given those questions when they report tomorrow? Or when we break for lunch, will they be given those questions? I guess that makes sense.
I'm really fine either way. There have been some questions suggested that might work for the afternoon sessions. I'm happy to read those to you to see how you feel about them.
These are the questions suggested by Mr. Kyler.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like to?
Chair Farr, Commissioners, I've also had a chance to talk a little bit with Steve Mokrahysky, and he shared his thoughts from the Seattle airport that included a couple additional questions to what Mr. Kyler put together.
A couple of additional ones to choose from.
Yes, and I guess I'd like to understand the process in terms of, are these questions you'd want to keep confidential right now, knowing that, here we are in a public session, you are going through an interview process. If we list them now,
Yes.
I would imagine some candidates will clearly be paying attention to this broadcast.
Okay.
You mean some prepared candidates?
Thank you very much.
Heaven forbid candidates prepare. Okay. So then the decision point we have right now is, do we want to hear the questions right now?
Yes.
Or shall we just get those questions sometime after we break for lunch tomorrow?
Yes.
We could prepare a number of questions for you to consider. What we would ask is then, once you have chosen a question to ask, that you are consistent in asking all of those candidates that same question.
Idea is to prepare several questions. We can take a look at it. But I think the key there, I would agree, is to remain consistent. So even if we took a question and amended it, where it maybe fit our delivery better, we have to stay consistent to how we deliver it to each candidate, no matter what. So I like that. I think that makes sense.
So if we have 3 questions, then each of the 3 non-board members would ask a question, or non-chair members would ask a question. And do we ask the 4th question, anything you'd like to add? Time permitting, anything you'd like to add?
For the 4th question?
Yeah. Not for the 4th question, but
Say call it 3.
during the 15-minute interview.
Yeah.
Do we want to include anything you want to add, which is typical?
You can, but just keeping in mind that you only have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as we all know, some candidates are going to be very verbose, where others won't share as much information. So just to make sure that we get all of the answers in and we don't have to prompt them too much that they're running out of time.
Then what I'm hearing, Commissioners, is that each of you will ask a question. You'll get to choose a question from a field of questions provided to us sometime after we break for the lunch period
Yes.
tomorrow.
Okay, good. That's
Yes.
why I wanted to know when they're going to do that.
And I will not ask a question, but I'll call on each commissioner to ask their questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so I think that's the process. And what I would suggest then is I'll reduce this to writing, and then, but I think it'd be good for the board to at least with head nods of consensus today that this is the process, or actually, better yet, make a motion and get it seconded and have this agreed that this is.
Tomorrow morning, make that.
Or I think if you're comfortable with the way we've laid it out, I think we've covered everything. You can do it this afternoon, and we can. I just thought we were on a tight schedule tomorrow. When I looked at the schedule, I thought it might be better. You got time today. We will certainly reduce it to writing and send it to the board so that each one of you has a copy of it in front of you tomorrow.
Today, that would certainly be our preference.
I mean,
And then would Ms. Jones be publishing that as part of tomorrow's agenda, revising the agenda to include?
As we look around, Ms. Jones, I'm confident that when we get this typed up today, that Ms. Jones will add that post it to the agenda today, so that everyone sees it, the public.
Okay.
It is not
during the process then?
You should have.
Okay.
Sounds good.
No, it's just no, I understand. It's not an order. It's just you want something in writing that gets posted so the public sees what you're looking at.
The process that's just
Yes,
described.
yes.
So we see the process, we can work on it overnight, and then the candidates see it, and
Right.
anyone can see it.
And what we send to you is what will be posted for the public to see. It'll be the exact same outline of the process.
And it will be shared again with the candidates in the Bob Straub room before the day begins.
Okay. And the candidates will be explained that it'll be explained to them that this is a strict time frame,
Yes.
and their time will be on the screen. This screen here, I'm presuming. So the 3 minutes will be on there. They'll be at that podium right there, so they can actually see the 3 minutes tick down.
Yes.
And at the end of 3 minutes, an alarm will sound, or a gavel will go down, and
It will be physically removed from the board.
we'll call the United
You can have a gong where you get it.
United Airlines staff will
Yeah,
come
United
and
Airlines security will come take them away.
There's no truth to the rumor that
There are
there's
so
a video
many of
Mr.
those out
Mulcahy.
today. Oh, my gosh.
For our commissioners, we do need to decide where this will be posted, and since it will not be part of the agenda per se. I will make this available.
Why don't we just hand it out to everybody?
Well, I think this. Okay, there you go.
Hey.
Hey,
Devin.
Public Information Officer is suggesting that she put this on our homepage.
Okay. So Ms. Ashbridge will place that on the homepage at some point between now and 5 o'clock.
and we can also, once we get it typed up, we can also make extra copies and have them available at the table for the public to pick up.
Excellent. Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'd like to move approval of the process as outlined by Mr. Dingle.
We have a motion? Is there second? Moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Good work, commissioners. And hopefully at this time tomorrow, I'll say the same thing. We do. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we need to read into executive.
I need to read us back in. We're not adjourned. That would have been a bummer if I'd just walked out of here.
I was getting ready to, and I just thought, oh, we have an executive session.
Chair Farr, would you like to review assignments before we move back to executive session?
Thank you. Let's have a review of assignments. Actually, we council announcements. We skipped that this morning. Any council announcements?
No.
Okay. Then review of assignments. Mr. Rickoff.
Although County Council should have announced that lunch for the Board of County Commissioners will be served in the BCC small room tomorrow, so you will not be homeless during that time. The only assignment that I'm aware of is ensuring that there's legal review for the long-term lease of to the Friends of the Old Mackenzie Fish Hatchery. And please correct me if I've missed an assignment.
That plus what you just
Plus everything we've done for the last 45 minutes.
Excellent. Then just a reminder to everyone, our next meeting after tomorrow will be on Monday, a joint elected officials meeting with the Eugene City Council here in Harris Hall at 5:30 to discuss the Eugene TSP Transportation System Plan. At this, I'm going to read us into executive session. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed above. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back into public session should the need arise. Otherwise, we will adjourn from executive session. At the sound of the gavel, we will adjourn the regular session and move into executive session in the BCC conference room.